Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of the Property Investment Australia podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Lachlan, Vidler, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend Will Sanchez, who still is traversing Brazil. He's not in the studio, so for those who might be looking at the video, we are still doing our Zoom style recordings, but fortunately, the audio is just as good. Will, how are you, mate?
I'm really, really good, especially because it's sunny over here.
Yeah.
And I've heard you guys are battling the weather.
We are, but I'll tell you what, this morning, blue skies, beautiful. I think it's like early mid-20s as well. Mate, you're missing out here too.
Beautiful, that's good. But I've been good otherwise. How are you?
You been good? Yeah? Oh, mate, I'm good. I've been very busy doing this filming for Channel 9. Very, very busy for budget battles.
When is it coming out, please?
Well, it's still sort of a little up in the air. I've heard some whispers about late October, but nothing confirmed. Nothing confirmed. I couldn't hang my hat on anything, but I believe 7:30 on 9, middle of the week, around end of October is when we're looking at the moment. But mate, the show is looking incredible. Some of these house transformations and obviously the investment advice I've been giving in to everyone, and then obviously doing it as well. I was painting mailboxes last week.
That's good fun.
And building a few little things. Mate, it's good. But I'll tell you what, I'm a little tired. But I've got 2 or 3 weeks off between the next one now, so it's I'll take that time to rest up and do my normal Atlas work. So yeah, otherwise, mate, I'm pretty good. Anything crazy or interesting happening in the world of finance at the moment for you?
Well, maybe I think so. Have you heard the first home buyer changes that are coming out in October?
Have I heard? Boy, have I heard. Do you want to tell everyone, or should I tell everyone? You tell them.
Well, there's some pretty amazing things. I would say the no income cap is probably the major thing. That's the number one. And the properties around New South Wales, I'd say. Now they used to be capped at 900. Now it's 1.5 mil. How good is that?
Mate, it's pretty crazy. And for those of you who aren't following along with the very recent news, and I guess that'll give everyone a bit of an indication of when we recorded this episode, in the last couple of days, the federal government has come out and they'd already announced these changes to the 5% first home buyer scheme, which was, as Will just said, it's the removal of income thresholds and it's the adjustment of the property value thresholds everywhere. So all capitals plus regionals. They announced that was going to come out and it was meant to start in January of 2026. However, I think it was some Monday morning good news. They've done a bit of a blindside. Usually when the government blindsides, it's not actually for the best. But for this time, it probably has been for the best in a general sense. They've announced that it's actually going to be happening as of October. Now, I don't know if it was actually 1st of October or if it was like a date to be announced in October, but October at some point nonetheless.
It's October TBA.
October TBA. There we go. So, mate, it's gonna be crazy. I did a little Instagram reel on Monday, and look, I'm certainly no hotshot influencer by any stretch, but
that one was unreal. Do you like that?
Yeah, and it popped off for me. It popped off, a good few thousand people tuning in. I think for me, the more impressive thing was that usually people don't, they don't share me around. They'll watch a reel or something. They won't share it. I had something like 60 shares on Instagram of people like sending it in a DM to other people. So it's obviously got people really interested and really, I guess, excited about what it's going to do and what it's going to bring. What's your thought? You saw me?
You popped up on my screen. I couldn't believe it. I said, I've seen this bloke.
You see this bloke? Were you one of my shares?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a good one. Yeah, that was a good one.
Oh, mate. Well, what's your thoughts? What's your overall thoughts? Like, give us a 1 to 2 minute summary of how you sort of think it's going to impact things. I won't even shape your answer. Like, yeah,
Or for us,
yeah, just in general, market, people,
I think it's going to be
give 1 to
amazing.
2 minutes. Tell us what you think.
No, this is going to be amazing, man. The amount of people who struggle, because back in the day, 200,000 for a couple, it was a high income threshold, right? But now in Sydney, especially New South Wales, it's not that high anymore, right?
It's really
Everything's
not.
so expensive. And brokers used to have to sort of play chess, right? With when you lodge an application, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're sort of getting towards the June, May, June, you had to look at people's situation, and you go, okay, let's wait for the next financial year to see if the notice of assessment is better for next year, or we use this one for the current year. Now it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's no threshold anymore, right? And in the 900,000 cap as well, I think that's going to help, especially where we are located, right?
Yeah.
Because
Well, they're now 1.5 mil. The now
yeah,
1.5.
yeah, which is now 1.5. Realistically, right? 900,000. It's getting harder to find even units in the inner west for 900, right? So I think this is going to benefit so many people. It's just going to put more pressure on property prices if you ask me. But regardless, it's good. It's good if you're trying to get in. And it's also good if you own properties, right? Yeah. One way or another, I think it's good.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think you nailed the 2-minute timings on that as well. So well done. I think in terms of my point of view, I mean, I think twofold, right? For me, the first and most important thing, and it's kind of what I actually said on my Instagram video yesterday, but for me, the single most important thing that I'm thinking about is that everything comes down to supply and demand, and the supply of properties isn't going to change based on this, but the demand is going to change, right? Supply is already heavily constrained. It's already heavily restricted. We are in a housing crisis. So the supply side, A, isn't changing, and B, it's already a real challenge. But on the demand side, you're now going to have all these other people entering into markets. And like, obviously, everybody knows what I do, and everyone knows that we buy all across the country. We don't just focus on one pocket. We don't just focus on Sydney, whatever it might be. But these changes impact everyone. Like some areas will have probably a little bit more of a disproportionate change. Like, for example, what you're saying around, for you, based in the inner west of Sydney, finding something for 900,000 is not really practical, unit, townhouse, anything. But finding something for 1.5 mil, you could still probably find a rundown townhouse, at that sort of a price, right? So now for you, it's going to have a huge impact. In other markets, maybe not as much of a disproportionate impact. But ultimately, the demand side is going to be impacted because, like you said, that $200,000 cap that on income that was there for people, it was 200, wasn't it? I didn't really follow it that much prior because it didn't impact. Yeah, 200
as a couple.
Right? Yeah, as a couple. That in some areas of Australia, that was quite large, right? But for lots of other parts, and I think more broadly, because we've seen inflation and not really too many changes in the caps over the years, like you said, it wasn't too much of a chat. It wasn't. There was a lot of people that weren't eligible for it, right? But now you're going to have all this demand coming in because people who weren't eligible are now eligible. And when you only need 5%, like you think about it, a 1.5 mil property, like 5% of that is what, 75,000. Now, you're still going to need some money for other costs and all the rest, of course. But instead of previously needing, let's just say that you needed. Let's say that you needed a 15% deposit because you wanted 10% for cost, 10% for your deposit and 5% for costs. You now only need 10%, right? You now need 150 instead of needing 225 maybe. Right? I'm just picking out random numbers, and I'm obviously choosing Sydney as the example. But it fundamentally shifts, right? Right now you've got couples who are going to have saved 100,000, 120,000 between themselves. Maybe now Bank of Mum and Dad comes in and goes, oh, well, you're only 20, 30K short. We can help out with that, right? But before, Bank of Mum and Dad would have had to be like, we need $80,000, $90,000. And they go, we just can't afford to give that to you either, So I think ultimately, supply and demand, it's going to send property prices through the roof. And then the other side, less easy to account for, is sentiment. It's a positive change. People see it. Sun's out. We're coming into spring. Weather's improving. There's a bit of warmth in the environment, and now you see a change like this. It just the sentiment all across Australia. What?
Bring it on. That's all I say.
So, we've been doing this for a little while now. We love our listeners. We love them. We get great feedback from our listeners. But we thought we'd just inject a little bit of a change up and do something a little bit different. So, we are going to have a little bit of a mini series inside the podcast, which hopefully everyone is as excited for it as we are when we were planning it out. But we're going to have a little bit of a mini series just to change it up and talk about things with a bit of a different lens. So our mini series is going to be about 3 property investment hacks for different groups of people. So we're going to start off today with 3 property investment hacks for business owners. All right. Now, a few house rules. If you'll let me give some house rules, William, I'd love to give a few for the listeners. Please. All right.
Please do.
So, if you are not a business owner, but you love listening to Will and I drone on in our podcast, right? The episodes are going to be targeted towards the demographic that's probably going to be in the title of the episode. But I would still encourage you to listen in because A, if you're not a business owner, you might become one day, right? Or B, the stuff that we are going to be talking about, whilst it's going to be slanted towards, say, a business owner in this case, and we've obviously got some other episodes coming up on this in this mini-series, there are still things that you can take away from it if you don't necessarily fit that demographic, okay? So, shall we kick off with 3 property investment hacks for business owners?
Let's do it.
All right, my friends. So, the reason why I thought that we'd kick off with 3 property investment hacks for business owners is, you and I are business owners. And I thought, why not target a bit of a demographic? Oh, the finger guns. The finger guns are going. Why don't we target a bit of a demographic that we know a lot about? All right. And the way that I think about it is that business owners can be some of the most powerful property investors, but they can also be some of the most disappointing property investors if they don't do it right. And that's what some of our little investment hacks are going to be about. So, business owners have some of the greatest earning potential and flexibility in their earning potential compared to anyone else, right? And for those that are thinking, are listening, and I'm sure you can imagine why, but from my point of view, I'll tell you, it's that if you're working for somebody else, and that is what the vast majority of people do, and I'm certainly not throwing any shade, right? Business ownership is a hard route. It is a hard route to do it, and it's an even harder route to be successful. But business owners, if they want to work harder, assuming they know how to run a successful business, they can improve their income, right? But if you're an employee, you can't really do that. Now, if you get commissions or things like that, of course, you have a bit of an element to do that as well. But if you're just a regular PAYG employee and you just earn your salary, you're going to find it hard to do that within the confines of your employment, right? So business owners, they have some of the greatest earning potential and flexibility, but their structuring, their tax strategy, their mindset, their attention, things like that, that is going to be some of the biggest determinants whether they fast track their property investment success or they stall their journey. So for me, the way that I'm thinking about it is these 3 property investment hacks are key to helping you as a business owner unlock your lending power, protecting your assets, and scaling smarter down your property investment journey. I said a lot there. What do you reckon, mate?
I think this is great. You've summarized so well. You're spot on there. When we're dealing with self-employed clients, the focus is usually on tax minimization.
Yeah.
Right. Whenever that happens, you minimizing the taxes, but you're also including a lot of expenses, usually in your financials, right? Which affects our friends. It affects our borrowing capacity, right? So preparation is key. So whenever you start thinking about doing that, getting a loan or prepare to to buy a property, getting your affairs ready is a key element for a successful transaction, right?
Yeah.
Usually, what I like to do as well is to have a chat to the accountant even before the tax returns are lodged.
Yeah.
Right. You have a chat to them, understand what the lending requirements are going to be, and before you get into that, you already know how to structure your accounting. Right. What do you think?
Mate, I reckon you have given us an amazing segue into the first hack that we're going to go for, because everything everything that you just said, I couldn't agree with more. And I think that something that business owners don't focus enough on is the fact that, unfortunately for them, you need to be more planned out than what a regular PAYG employee needs to be, right? Most business owners are so focused on their business that I don't think that they give as much thought as they should into it. And I think a lot of it is they possibly don't understand either. You know, they know their business, they know their industry really well, but they don't necessarily understand the property investment side of that. And I'm not talking about like how to identify markets or anything like that. I'm talking about like the actual process and the method that they need to go about because of their circumstances. And I think that also, frankly, they're just busy. And other parts of their life, like I'm hugely guilty of, I'm sure you're the same. I have some parts of my life that suffer massively because I put all my attention and energy into business. And I can almost become lazy in other parts of my life, right? And I think that as a business owner, when we talk about property,
I can relate.
You can relate, right? It's so
Absolutely.
easy to go and become lazy around like, oh, I haven't done my tax, or I don't know, I'm spending too much, whatever it is. I don't want to even try and make something up, right? But you have to be planned, and I think that a lot of times they're just not, because they're so focused on what they're exceptional at, which is their business.
And not only that, if you allow me to just add a little bit of juice to this subject, sometimes people forget that we work with numbers, right?
Yep.
I get a lot of IT people who used to be PAYG, and because they can get a lot more if they become self-employed, they forget to tell us along the way, right? It happens a lot. Like you start looking at documents and then you start preparing an application. Well, the next thing you see, well, there's no more pay slips. And then you ask the question, well, what happened? They've offered me a
contract.
A contract or something, but I'm going to get twice as much. I say, oh, great, but we've already started the process, right?
Yeah.
This is something you got to plan out. But anyway, and it's problems we come across very regularly, which you think they're not usual, right? But they happen a lot along the way. It's usually when they start looking for properties, these things happen.
Yeah. And I think that that's the thing, right? Is probably going back to my comment. They just don't know. They just think, business owners, like whether it's the exact example you gave where you're PAYG, now you've taken on a contract role and it's like the same or whatever, or you're a proper bona fide business owner and you're sort of down the road. I think the key is that people often just think, oh, I see money, therefore I must be able to buy property, and it's not always that case, but let's dive in. Yep. All right. So let's dive into the first hack. And hack number 1 of the 3 property investment hacks for business owners is pay your tax, right? You need to pay your tax if you want to grow your borrowing. Now, I know you can talk pretty intelligently on this, but if you allow me, I want to give like the layman's explanation of that first, and then you can come in and hit everyone with the bit more of the technical mortgage broker answer. Right?
Please do. You save my voice as well, because I've got the stress.
I know you're a bit raspy, aren't you? Oh, mate, you poor bloke.
Yeah.
So in business, right? Nobody, and even outside of business, right? I guess, nobody ever wants to pay more tax than they need to, right? There is the very famous video of Kerry Packer sitting before Parliament or a committee of Parliament.
That's gold.
And he talks
That's
about, it's gold. If you haven't seen it, Google Kerry Packer tax video and you'll see it and it will just give you a right laugh, right? But there's the video and Kerry Packer goes on to say he's getting probed by this parliamentary committee about paying tax, and they're basically insinuating to him that, oh, you know, how dare you minimize your tax? And he turns around and says, minimize it? If you're not minimizing your tax in this country, then you're doing something wrong, because you blokes don't spend our money well enough that I should be giving you any more of it as an extra, right? And it's just the way he delivers it is perfect, right? But coming back to business owners, right? Or anyone, none of us want to pay more tax than we need to, right? But here's the thing. If you don't pay tax, that means from a business books point of view, like your P&L, that means that you're not making money. And if you're not making money, you can't go to the bank and ask them to lend you money, because their first question is going to be, well, how are you going to pay us back? How are you going to pay the loan back? Because according to the books of your business, you make $0, or you make like 20 grand, or you lose 20 grand. You don't have enough income. And I guess if I was to simplify it, that'd be like going as a PAYG employee to the bank and saying, I work part-time, 10 hours a week, stocking the shelves at Coles or Woolworth, and I make 20 grand a year annualized. And you probably wouldn't expect the bank's going to give you money in that situation. But business owners, they go, I just turned over $3 million, $5 million, $10 million, whatever it is. I should be able to borrow money. Except when you don't show any profit, you can't do it, right? So that's the simple explanation. Can you give us some stories or just dive a bit deeper into that from the mortgage broking point of view?
That's good. You put me on the spot there. I would say the biggest issue I come across is a lot of people think that having sales equals
like revenue,
money.
Like revenue, you mean
sales
revenue? Yeah,
equals revenue equals having money, but they don't account for the expense part, right? So this is usually a big misconception when I'm analyzing tax returns. People usually come to us with, I've got 200,000 in revenue in sales. I think I should be able to borrow money and, get a loan. But they forget that they look at the expenses as well, right? Which gives you a total figure down the bottom, right? So it's sales minus expenses, it will give you the result. And usually that result can help you with your borrowing, right? If you already have a PAYG, a figure from your business, or if you do just withdrawals from your business, whatever the case may be, if there's no surplus down the bottom, there's an issue, right? So that's probably the biggest misconception people have, which for you and I is just, we understand the numbers, right? So for us, how can you not know this? But it's really, really, really common for people to get confused in that sort of in those numbers. I would say that's probably the biggest one for us.
So would you agree with me if I was to say, we're not necessarily saying that every single year for the next 30 years that you have to go and show your profits or to bump them up or things like that. But what would be the best plan is that you need to have a plan around it, so that way, based on life circumstances and business circumstances and just any of the considerations or circumstances that are there, that by being planned to know what years you want to show profits and profits that are going to really help you, you do that. And then the years that you don't need it, you don't have to, if you're really focusing on minimizing your tax obligations and things like that. So it's not a once you're in, you have to be all in forever, but you kind of need that plan, and you kind of need people around you to help give you that advice, so that way, you decide, you go, hey, we've just started the 2026 tax year. This year, I really want to show a profit. So I'm going to be smarter about the way I spend money in the business. As I approach the end of the financial year, I'm not going to try and, spend 50 grand or 100 grand on bills just to get the tax obligations down. I'm actually going to focus on boosting that profit so that in, July next year, I'm in a position where I'm showing, $250,000 of profits and I've paid myself $250,000 as well. So now the bank sees me as being a 500K, you know, in a very basic sense, a 500K income earner. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in the same way people don't realize a surplus can be used, for the worse, for the better as well. A lot of people come to us with like 80,000, 100K, 110 as wages from the business.
Yeah.
And they make like 50K in profits, right? Sometimes they buy a one-off equipment for the business or a car or something that can be sort of taken away from the calculation, right? Because it's a one-off thing. It's not going to be a recurrent expense. And the banks look very, very closely to all these expenses, right? Especially the large ones. And these things can be added on. And next thing you see, you've got a really, really large borrowing capacity. In fact, I've helped a couple amazing clients from the Brazilian community. They started buying a nice property around how much was it? 749,000 down in the Wollongong area. And then the business just kept getting better and better, heaps of profits, but the wages were the same, so about 100,000, right, for each. But the profits were just insane. And when I looked at the numbers, I said, guys, did you know that you've got like $2.5 million in borrowing capacity? You go, no. I said, there you go. So they're on to the third property, I think, in a very short space of time, which is amazing.
And I guess for the business owners listening, like I know I'm making it really basic, but is it fair to say that when business owners are having their borrowing power assessed, I know there's other things that go on to it. So like I said, I'm just trying to make it really basic. The simplest way to try to think of themselves as like the way a PAYG employee does is they look at their salary, right? And they just go, I make this amount. And then, you can kind of do some rough back of envelope calculations, right? For a business owner,
because it doesn't change much if you think about it, right?
Exactly.
PAYG, it's set in stone. It won't change. That's how much you earn. And that's about it. Nothing else can be added.
So for business owners, a really basic way to think about it would be like what you pay yourself, like your salary or your director fees or whatever it might be, plus or minus any profits in the business. That'd be like a really basic way to conceptualize it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there you go, guys. So if you're a business owner, you need to pay your tax, right? Because if you're paying tax, it means you're showing a profit. So if you're paying yourself, 150K, let's say you're paying yourself 100K, 150K is your salary, or 100. Yeah, we'll go 100, make it easy. And then you can show 200K of profit. There will be other things that go into it. However, you can think of yourself very loosely as having like a 300K income to show the banks, right? Very, very loosely. All right. So every time, if you're paying yourself your 100K, but now you're going, I'm trying to minimize tax, so I don't want to show that 200K of profits. You've now gone from showing the bank 300K of income to now only showing the bank 100K of income for you personally, right? So you can imagine how much that's going to drop your borrowing, right? And like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like a 300K borrowing power, a 300K income, you might be able to borrow sort of 1.5 to maybe 1.7 mil, just very roughly. Will, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? But then if you're only showing 100K, you might only be able to borrow 500 to 700,000.
Couldn't agree more.
Very roughly, right? So right there, you've just taken yourself, around $1 million out of your borrowing just because you wanted to minimize your tax. And here's some quick maths for you. Your 200K profit, if you're a small business owner, odds are you're paying about 25% tax, which means you would have paid 50K in tax, right? Off that 200K. But if you went and bought 1.5 mil worth of property and that went up 10%, that's 150K, right? You would have had 3 times what you paid in the tax coming out as your capital growth. But you've now just handicapped yourself because you didn't do that, right? So that's hack number 1. You need to pay your tax to be able to grow your borrowing. It's a no-brainer. You need to do it, but you need to be planned, okay? So let's move on to hack number 2, which is, and something we probably should have said right at the start of the episode, but I think probably very important here for this one, is None of this is financial advice, guys. We say it very frequently, but go talk to your appropriate professional. We are just speaking very generally here, and none of it is applicable to any of the listener circumstances, right? Hack number 2, structure your business and investments separately. Now, if you're happy, I can give my 2 cents on this one first.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
All right. So this is where the advice piece is going to be really important, right? Because if you're buying a property for your business, you may buy that within the same structures and entities as what your business is. But if we're talking about just sort of more vanilla property investment, as a business owner, there's a really key word that comes out when you own a business, and that word is risk, right? You expose yourself to far more risk than the average person, right? It doesn't matter whether you run a cafe, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a mortgage broker or a real estate agent, you expose yourself to more risk than if you were just a software engineer at, Microsoft, let's say, right? So structuring is not just important from a borrowing point of view, and we have talked about that before, and I'm sure we'll touch on it very briefly now, but it's also really important from a risk point of view, because if, God forbid, something happened that meant that risk that you had exposed yourself to through running your business, which is just the course of business, and your properties were all held within the same entity, or your assets in general, you now expose yourself to those assets being on the table if there was things like litigation or things of that nature, right?
God forbid.
God forbid, right? And I think the important thing is you have to talk about these things. If you're listening and you're a business owner, you cannot afford to have your head in the sand about a conversation like that, because none of us plan to do the wrong thing. None of us plan for the wrong thing to occur. None of us none of us go out of our way to have bad things happen, but they can, right? And you don't want to be chasing a tail after the fact, trying to fix it when you could have just been a little bit more planned in the future, right? I guess before we get onto some of the lending and other structuring things, what do you think of that? What do you think about the risk conversation as a business owner?
Oh, I think it's a key component of your strategy. It has to, right? If you think about it, for us, for myself and my wife, for example, right? Business owners, we provide services to other people, so we got to be careful, right?
Yeah.
If something happens, we got to be protected one way or another, right? And one way to protect your assets is by having a smart structure in place, right? If something happens, someone tries to take it to court or something, and then the only thing you've got is your house, and it's held in your personal names, what happens? You're going to be taken away.
You're stuck,
right?
You're stuck.
So you're stuck, correct. So having the right set of advice from different people and the right structure from the outset can save you some pretty strong headaches, let me tell you.
Yeah. If you're a business owner, please do not bury your head in the sand around structuring, right? But then, so what we're talking about there is asset protection, right? But when we then come into other pieces, right, we then do have the fact that structuring your business and your investments separately, it can make the borrowing process not only smoother, but also it can have impacts down the road with your borrowing power, right? Like, imagine a scenario where you have all your property investments tied underneath your business. Imagine the bank trying to peel back the layers on profit and loss, expenses, debts, all the rest going on. I mean, Will, would you agree? That's going to be very complicated.
Absolutely. And the banks, if you go to an investment savvy mortgage broker, they will tell you from the outset, get prepared. Like, don't come to us with everything jumbled up and then for us try to sort of peel it off and try to understand the cascade of income and blah, blah, blah. And then you've got 10 entities and one sends the money to the other one. Just get prepared. Like, start a good structure. Talk to your accountant. They will tell you, maybe just draw some PAYG income from your business. And some good banks have special policies for that sort of structure as well, because you don't need to provide much information around all the entities that you have if you receive PAYG from your business. If it's a clear income and it's clear evidence, right? So I think that having that conversation from the outset, preparing, will save you a lot of time and headaches. Because, come on, do you like when brokers ask you to, can you please provide me your taxes for this entity? And then you provide sort of half information. Then you go back, I've just realized you've got another entity. Can you also include that one? You've got another one. You've got a trust now. So then you have to provide all the tax returns for everything, all the financials. So get prepared, and it's going to save everyone time.
Yeah. No, look, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that the last point, which I don't think we need to dwell on, I think we could talk about that. I think we have talked about it separately, but we can also talk about it again in a different episode, is obviously that you can have borrowing power impacts by structuring correctly, right? The whole idea of this unlimited borrowing power through trusts and corporate trustees and all the rest, it's obviously not unlimited, and there's so many, and there are restrictions and things.
Oh,
but I think
mate, don't get me started. I don't want to start on this because I talk to so many people about that, because the conception is you get unlimited borrowing capacity. I said, yes, you do. Come on, man.
With the right guidance and the right structures, you can put yourself into a positive situation. But I think probably the biggest takeaway, I think, so that we don't have to dive into that one, because I'd rather move on to our third and final hack, is just that you can improve your borrowing for the long term, not the immediacy, but the long term, by having yourself structured correctly. And I don't think that has ever been more true than for business owners, because then you are talking about other companies, you're talking about other trusts, you're talking about your spider web of entities and all the rest. So that is why you need to have your dream team around you. All right. But
thank you.
Let's move on to hack number 3 for business owners, which is that you need to treat your portfolio like a business as well. Right. So when it comes to your business, you know it inside and out. If you are a successful business owner, you know that you have to manage your budgets, your forecasts. You need to hire employees / outsource. You need to have a business plan. You need to have all these things in place to set your business up for success. So you already know how to think like a business owner, because you are a business owner. What you now need to do is take that thinking and put it into your property portfolio, right? So what I mean by that is, you need to have your buffers, right? Almost like your budget in a business, right? You need to have them, because in a business, what happens if you have a bad month or a bad couple of months? You don't want to be flying by the seat of your pants and you've only got, a fortnight's worth or a month's worth of liquidity in the business. Same thing in your property investment portfolio, right? You need to have your buffers there. What if the aircon breaks? What if you need to dig a pipe up in the backyard? That happened to me. My first investment property, owned it for like 2 months. Had to get an excavator into the backyard to dig up a pipe.
It always happens with a lot of people.
Oh, mate, 10 grand later. And if the buffers weren't in place, that would have been a rock and a hard place, right? So think like a business owner. Have your buffers in place, right? You then need to plan. In your business, you have a plan. And if you don't, I'm impressed that you've had a successful business to this point, right? You need to have a plan in place. What's in your business, you should be thinking, what is my next 12 months? Maybe what's your next 24 months? Depending on the size and scale of your business, maybe a 5-year plan as well. You need the same in your property portfolio, right? You need to have a portfolio plan in place to understand where you're starting, right? When you started your business, you didn't start trying to get the biggest businesses or contracts in town. You had to start small. You had to prove that you could deliver what was going on. You had to prove what was going, how you were going to, deliver on that, not just the quality of it, but the actual delivery mechanism. Same thing in your property portfolio. You need to start with your plan, because you're going to start smaller. You're not going to go from 0 to a $5 million purchase. That'd be silly, right? So you're going to set yourself along the road. And most importantly, you would make data-backed decisions in your business. That's going to be around sales data. That's going to be around qualitative data. That's going to be around industry data. That's going to be around a ton of different data points. You need to do the same in your property portfolio. You can't just be thinking emotionally of, I want to buy the property next door, or, I heard one of the guys that, I heard my CFO talking about this area. You need to be making your data-backed decisions that align with your property plan. So that's my first point. What do you think of that one?
Oh, 100%. I couldn't agree more. He just, hit the nail on the head. It's not
Nail on the head.
much more for it. No.
All right. Well, that's easy. We'll move on to the second point in treating your portfolio like a business, right? You need to have your dream team, right? You need to hire professionals. Now, if you've started a successful business, of course you could be, a sole trader or a solo operator, or just, even just one person in your team validates the point I'm about to make, which is you cannot grow a business by yourself. You always need help. You need people to bring in certain different skills that either aren't your strength, or they could be your strength, but you now need to focus on other things, right? You might be bringing in somebody for sales. You might be bringing somebody in for marketing. You might be bringing somebody in for account management. You might bring somebody in for delivery of whatever it is, your service, your product, whatever it might be. Same thing in your property portfolio. You might be smart. You very well might be a very smart person because you've started a successful business. But if you're that smart, you also know that by outsourcing and building your dream team, they're going to take you faster and further, especially because now you get to focus on your business, right? You're now not having to think about how to grow and scale and run a business, as well as how to do the same on a property portfolio. You now get to focus on scaling your business, which is going to scale your income, which is going to allow you to buy property more and faster, because you build out an A grade, an A team, So you need to hire those professionals, same way you'd hire your team members, right? Top tier professionals that are excellent at what they do. What are your thoughts on that?
I know a few of them.
Yeah.
It's
so important, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. You cannot do everything yourself, right? Because more often than not, you'll find yourself in a situation where you're going to let your emotion come to make the decision for you, instead of, be based on data, on information, on actual history, right? So it's key to, get out of the situation, let the professionals do what they got to do, and the result will present itself, along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, most business owners, when they start with themselves, right? Sometimes you might start with a team if you have funding, or you start with a partner or something like that. But more or less, you often start businesses by yourself, and it can be a lonely road. And that feeling of when you bring in that first team member, and it either frees up your capacity slightly just to take a breath, or it frees up your capacity to allow you to then focus on another part of the business to grow that. As a business owner, just how beneficial that is. So think of it the same in your property journey. Think of it the exact same in your property journey, right? And the final point on this about treating your portfolio like a business is don't micromanage every situation, right? In your business, that if you've run a successful business, you cannot micromanage every staff member, every decision, every outcome, right? When you start that scaling process, I'm sure that there were times, right? And I'm sure that even when you're past that, there are still times. I know that there are times when I micromanage things, right? And I like to think when I do it, there's a good reason for it, right? But we don't exist in a constant state of micromanagement, because you wouldn't be able to be successful and to scale and to grow, right? It's the same.
I hate micromanaging, to be honest.
Right? It's the same in your portfolio. It's the absolute same. You need to be across the detail, but you need to trust your professionals, right? If they present you a common sense plan or a common sense something, and, that trust has been built and earned, you need to then give it to them, because otherwise you're going to spend your time second guessing, thinking you can do it better, thinking that you're smarter. And you very well may be you very well may be a smart individual, right? But the point is that we all have our niche, or as the Americans call it, the niche. We all have our
niche. Is
a
writer, yeah.
The niche. We all have our specialties. So you need to do same as you let your team members flourish by using their specialties in your business. You need to let your property investment, team do the same, right? So the way I think about it is, if you wouldn't do it in your business, don't do it in your portfolio.
Great
right?
segue.
Love it.
Fantastic. Yeah.
All right.
Really, really good.
Well, mate, I'll tell you what, this episode ended up going a little bit longer than I thought it would. But that's okay. We love to have a bit of a chat. But I think that that's probably a really good point for us to leave everyone. How do you feel about stopping there?
No, I think it's great. I think we're just about to go on to the next one, which is fantastic. It's good.
Yeah,
good
unreal.
To stop there. Yeah.
Well, guys, I hope that you enjoyed listening in to the start of our mini-series about 3 property investment hacks for our different groups of people. And today it was 3 investment property hacks for business owners. So if you're a business owner, I hope that it's giving you some value, even if it was just calling a spade, because sometimes the simple answer is the most obvious, and it's the most important thing to have front of mind. Because I know for me personally, I just did a big drive to go to that filming. I listened to about 3 hours worth of podcasts on business and all sorts of stuff. And it was crazy just sitting there and listening to some of the most simple ideas being retold to me in a different way. And it made me really think about, oh, hang on a minute, I just need to kind of do that, right? So hopefully, even if this podcast was simple, it's put it top of mind for you. Now, we are going to be coming back next for our next episode with our next 3 property investment hacks. I'm not going to tell you who it's going to be for, but we are going to be coming back very shortly for that. But if you are looking for help on that mortgage broking, that finance front, and you are a business owner or somebody else, make sure you go chat with Will and the team at Aussie Newtown. Platinum team, platinum bloke. He might not be in the country, but he's still working hard for you. So that should show just how dedicated him and the team are. All right, so go chat with them. His contact details are in the episode bio and I guess the overall podcast, the podcast bio. And if you are a business owner and you're looking to start or scale your property portfolio, come and have a chat with myself and the team at Atlas Property Group. You can get us at atlaspropertygroup.com.au. You can also find that link in the episode bio. But otherwise, also drop us those 5-star reviews. Until we're back, thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thank you.
This is a Piccolo podcast production.